Hello and welcome back to BTY. Today, Michael and I are going to be doing another BTY icon on Penuel the Black Pen. He's this amazing South African podcaster that loves to do topics on various economical aspects, political aspects, and even some social issues. What I've really found attractive about his style of podcasting is that he's very honest and he can be very polarizing at times as well. But before we get into that, Michael, it's been a while since we've done this, since we've had a video with this sort of setup. How have you been, man? And welcome back to the podcast.
Brother Daniel, I think the people have been crying in the streets for how long it's been, but it's good to hop back on a conversation with you, brother. On my side, all has been going well. I've been steady grinding, and what I've been trying to do recently in my life is actually improve on a few different things that I wasn't really working on so much before. Things like
Yeah.
my fashion, even improving my eyesight. So, sort of diving into areas of self improvement that I haven't been for a while, or maybe at all. But it's been interesting, man.
Yeah.
I've been enjoying that. Work is good and family life is good, so can't complain. Brother, how's things going for you?
Yeah, so it's been quite a busy period in my life. What I must say is that when I came back from South Africa, from Cape Town, I was also just straight into the grind, finding my feet in a new internship that I'm busy with now.
Yes.
But it's been a lot of fun. I've been learning a lot there. And also when I look at self-improvement, I've been spending a lot of time on track, though I've recently got a bit of a hamstring injury, so I'm back in the gym. And I've also been making sure to build my knowledge. So I think it was about a month or a few weeks after I came back that I went into what we call a monk mode, where I was just spending a lot of time focusing on books. So what I try and do is that every morning when I commute to Windhoek, I read a chapter, and when I commute back to Rehoboth, then I read another chapter. So I've really been gaining a lot of knowledge,
Sure.
especially on business. And yeah, that's basically what I've been busy with in the self-improvement aspect of things, man.
I love to hear it, bro. Yeah, Flip, you can't get enough of reading books, and it's quite difficult to make the time. So that's a cool way to do it that you found there, brother. Of making that time for that. But yeah, this is gonna be an interesting episode, brother. BTY Icons. I think the last one that we did was on Akani Simbine, this
That's
African
correct.
athlete. We've covered a few different people in this series where these are just people that if you look at the trend, it's sort of gone in the way that we've done on a few South African people, and I think that just
Hmm.
is because we are young African men ourselves, and these are guys that are a bit more relatable to us. It's
Yes.
awesome to look at guys who have made it in America or maybe the UK or somewhere else, but yeah, I think looking at a guy like today like Penuel, who's representing South Africa and Africa as a whole, and making some big
Yeah.
moves in the podcast scene. It's very cool to see, especially since we are, obviously trying to make it in that world as well. I think he's a big inspiration, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned there, man. In that the areas that he likes to talk about is often like societal issues, political issues. He speaks about like race and things like that. That's where a lot of people might have heard his name, on topics like that. But he covers so much, man. Like you said, there's life issues that he goes into. Yeah, giving some of his stuff a watch more recently as well. Um, yeah, he covers such a broad range of topics, and I think he's got a skill for just speaking and being entertaining while doing so.
Yeah. True. Yeah, and what's really like also drawn me to him is that when he covers his topics, he's not afraid to get vulnerable as well. And that's something cool to see from an African guy where he sometimes gets so passionate about the topics that he speaks about that his eyes get teary and he also just starts pouring on camera. which is something that not any man can do, and
Yeah.
that's something that you can find an inspiration out of as well, because that just shows the authenticity that this guy comes with when you're looking at his content. So my question to you would be that, having done a bit of views on different videos that he's brought out, his content that he brings, what is something that you can take from him and also apply in your life?
Mm. Yeah, brother. So, yeah, when I look at a guy like Penuel, and I think what he brings to the podcasting space, that's quite different, is that he definitely brings forward, the idea of independent thinking. And I
Yeah,
think why I would say that is, in all of his videos, he's often tackling topics that can be quite controversial, and topics that, um, I think there's always a mainstream way of thinking about something. But what I've seen is that he comes in and is not afraid to question the mainstream way of thinking about these things. Just because the media and the government might say that this is the way things are, um, or the mainstream idea of this is a certain way. He's going to come in and question that. For example, I mean, I was watching a video of his not too long ago, man, where he was talking about actually like pornography and the effects of that.
yeah,
And what's interesting, is that you look at the media, and oftentimes the use of pornography for young men can actually be like promoted. They say, it's got medical benefits and all of that. But he was just,
yeah,
from his perspective, giving a whole lot of reasons of why this isn't good, and actually giving facts on that as well, which is quite interesting to hear. So I think that's just an example of
yeah,
how he likes to question the mainstream idea, and what he encourages is being open minded. It's not just questioning things for the sake of questioning these things, but just having that open mindedness to think differently about things, to form your own opinion at the end of the day. So
yeah,
yeah, that's definitely one of the main things that I've gotten from him, and I think young people can learn from a guy like that. And when you listen to him, I think you can't help but learn and pick that up, because a lot of young people can be sort of crowd, just a part of the crowd, let's say, and followers. If they hear something on social
mm,
media, then that can often have a very strong effect on your opinion. So I think having a voice like his in this space is cool because, like I said, it encourages young people to form their own opinion and not just follow in that crowd. Take a look for themselves, which I think is super super important, brother. But
yeah. No, it is.
yeah, but also what I would ask from your side, I think, yeah, I remember the reason that I found out about Penuel was probably because you mentioned him to me a couple of times.
Mm.
So what I would say is, what I'd want to ask from you is, like, what would you say is one of the biggest things that you've learned from him, as a voice, as well,
Mm.
speaking into your life. But apart from that,
Yeah.
what do you think he has done that has actually helped him to become so successful, and make him stand out as a African podcaster, and reach the success he is currently reaching? What do you think about him, or what he's done has actually allowed that?
Yeah, so I would say that he's very well versed on the topics that he speaks about. He's got a lot of depth in that. And then also the crowds that he, or not the crowds, but the panelists that he can bring onto his podcast, which is like very big guys. I mean, he's
Mm,
spoken to a guy like Fusi Tembaguayo,
yeah.
Musi Maimani, and these very big political or pioneers in their own spaces. And also, what I really find valuable about him is that he's not just a guy that rants about problems in South Africa, but he actually comes up with solutions or options that you can look at. So if he brings up a topic like the government isn't doing well in this space because this, like, it's ineffective, you can see that it's not working, then he actually mentions ways to combating that. And what he also does is he doesn't shy away from looking at what has been done right, even if it was done by a different party or a different group outside of his ethnicity. And
Hmm.
then he says this is ways that you can learn from. And he also takes on like various different, like, big names in South Africa, and says like this is
Calls them
things
out. Yeah.
that they've been doing wrong, and
Mm.
he calls them out and that they can be doing things better. So that's something that I would want to apply as well, is that not being afraid to call someone out and then call them to correction. But when you're doing that, you must be making sure that you've got solutions and you've got all of the facts. So when listening to him, he can also keep your attention from for a long time, and that's something that we can learn as well when we're doing our podcast or when we're speaking, just to hold the attention because of the way we articulate ourselves. And that's also how he's able to do it, and he puts a lot of passion into what he's doing. He's committed full send onto it. And then, yeah, just another point there would be what I relate to very much about or with him is like he's very much on self dependency when
Yes.
getting
Yes.
out of economical problems. He doesn't say no, this because the government isn't helping me with this and that, but he actually looks at ways of being like of empowering himself. And that's something that I also strongly believe in, that yes, the government is there to support you, or they're supposed to make the space that you're in viable to do your thing within. But
Yep.
it's not like we don't have something to offer to the government as well by giving our services or adding value to our country ourselves. So that's something that I very much believe in as well, is that when you're looking at your situation, you have to look at ways how you can solve it yourself. I know that everything isn't in our control, but there is things that you can do. And
Yeah.
then comes in the entrepreneurial mindset, which he also has, and that's also something that I know I drive at personally, and that's something that you also drive at. So that's also where I get a lot of inspiration, because he is doing this podcasting thing as his full time. So that's a space that we also want to be moving in.
No, I can agree more there, brother. It's a cool point that you mentioned there about the fact that he's, yeah, like you said, not afraid. I think that's
Yeah.
definitely something to be admired. A lot of, I mean, something that sort of relates to that I also wanted to bring up is that he's quite like resilient in the face of
Mm.
criticism, because
Yeah.
like we mentioned, he often talks about these somewhat controversial topics, on race. He doesn't shy away from these kind of things, and he's not afraid to say what he actually believes on those topics. But what we can
Yeah.
often see is that people will come in with like a strong opinion. I don't know if you've seen this before
Mm.
on a certain topic, whether that be about something controversial like race or gender or social
Mm.
issues like that. Um, People will come in with a strong belief, but as soon as they receive criticism from a large portion of people, whether it be through social media or
Mm.
maybe they're receiving some kind of other pressure. What can often happen as well is that people lose sponsorships because of saying something like that.
Yeah.
So there's different consequences that can come with that, different types of backlash. But
Mm.
yeah, as I mentioned, some people come under that pressure and immediately they just cave and they like change their opinion. They're like, I've seen that before where their
Mm.
opinion that they were voicing when they first came out, is quite strong, and then they all of a sudden they start to bend to those groups that are calling them out. But he, like I said, he
Yeah.
hasn't really shied away, despite the fact that he's
Mm.
received criticism for his opinions. I saw a video where he was literally like, basically saying that like people had tried to cancel him, but it's not going to work. He's going to keep doing what he's
Yeah.
doing. So yeah,
Mm.
I admire that, like I said. And although you can understand people bending to pressures, like, whether it be other people who are in spaces of influence,
Mm.
I always admire and respect that when someone is able to not bend, not, even if you do go through a couple of hard consequences, like losing a sponsorship, or losing an opportunity that you might otherwise have had. I think sticking to what you truly believe in is always something that young men and young women can really, really learn from.
Yeah. And then just to add on to that as well, is that if you look at his content, he's always mentioning his team as well. That's working with him and that he's got behind him. So he's not afraid to give credit where credit is due. And then also what we can learn from him is that when it comes to calling out different genders, for example, there's things that men might be doing wrong within
Mm,
the South African context, and he's not he calls it out, and then he actually mentions that this is wrong and why it is wrong. But he's also not afraid to stand up for men and also call out the ladies when they need to be called out. Topics on
is unbiased here.
being yeah, he's unbiased. That's actually the word I'm looking for. Like he's able to delve into these different contexts or different scenarios or different situations without delving to a certain side of things. He tries to always stay as unbiased as possible to give logic and to give the facts for what they
Mm,
are and not to shy away behind the feeling. And that's also what you should be doing when you're in the space. You should
yeah, that's
not
good.
always
That's good.
be going with how you're feeling, but actually with what is actually true and what the facts are. So there's a lot to learn from him. I would say that look at his content. If you haven't heard of Penuel before, go check him out. We'll put some of his links in our bio. What's it called?
The
But then
description of the
yeah,
video, for sure.
so in the description, yeah, there's a lot to learn. But if you've enjoyed this video, then definitely make sure to follow us.
Yes, brother. Before we wrap up, what I would want to ask you, as someone who's been creating podcasts for 3 years, as an African podcaster, um,
Yeah.
yeah, what do you think that us African podcasters can do to, despite the fact that Peña's doing very well for himself,
Yeah.
what do you think we can do to make more of a impact and maybe be recognized more globally?
Yeah, so thinking about that now, it's like it's quite a tricky question, but also not the most difficult. But it would probably be to make our content more relatable and to look at what works in a South African or a Namibian or a Zimbabwean context. So you have to look at what works in the African space of things
Yeah.
because a lot of times I think as African content creators we've tried to follow the trends of what the Europeans are doing, what they're doing in the West, but we should actually start creating our own image through an African sense so that the content that we are putting out is based on truly something of an African context and that can make it authentic in that space so that when there is Europeans or Americans watching our content or even Asians, they get the African feel from our content and not something that is maybe quite neutral or feels rather European, even though we're from Africa. So it would be to make it
Mm-mm.
relatable in that sense, and then also to focus on topics that is based on Africa and what's occurring on our continent, but then can also be of benefit to Europe because the more we create what's happening around us and make it relatable, the more interest I think it will even peak out of Europeans and Asian viewers.
No, that's true, bro.
What would you say?
Yeah, no, cool to hear your perspective on that. Like you say, it's an interesting question. I think that's the question that we are all asking ourselves. But
Yeah.
what you've mentioned there is um, not trying to be an imitation, of what is
Mm.
working in America or England. I think that's always important. Is that at the end of the day,
Yeah.
for something to work, it has to be authentic. It has to be innovative. It has to be
Mm.
more than just someone wanting to be successful because they've seen it,
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. So I think really having that
Mm.
passion and really having new ideas to bring to the table. Yeah, and just
Mm.
I think that's also only going to come by us encouraging, or us Africans as well, just not being afraid of like putting our voices out there because, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the only thing that's going to stop you. If you never put it out there, you'll never know if it's going to work.
Mm.
But until you do that, yeah, and until you take that risk, there's no chance of it happening. But yeah, bro, it's been a cool
Yeah.
conversation to have. Hopefully, you guys listening have enjoyed listening to us and hearing a bit about Penuel. Let us know what your thoughts are on him and African content creators, podcasters in general. But Dan, it's been cool to have this conversation
Yeah.
with you. And yeah, I think we'll be back again soon for another episode. Daniel and I are definitely trying to innovate with our content a bit more, and I hope that you guys have been enjoying that. Um, yeah, it's been a busy
Yeah.
period for us, but we look forward to growing together with this community BTY. And we always have these big ideas, but we are putting them in the works at the moment, and there's big things coming. If you did enjoy, leave a like, subscribe, and that's it from us. Much love.
Cheers.